we are going to look at the law of the sea. So realize that in international law, there are various laws. For example, the law of the sea. You realize that this universe is comprised of the sea, is comprised of lakes, rivers, among others. But the question is, what law regulates the sea? We know the Red Sea, the Mediterranean Sea. We know oceans such as the Indian Ocean, among others. So today we are going to look at the law of the sea in international law. How do we regulate uh, the sea? So you're going to see that with regulation of the sea, different upon UN coming in place, that is in 1945, it had to regulate certain spheres. That is the land, that is the sea, the airspace, among others, because you realize some wars way back 1914, 1945, world wars, they were fought majorly on the sea. So there was need to regulate that the sea, or there was need to regulate the sea. So how was the sea regulated? So UN had to come up with a law, that is the UN clause, or the UN clause, that is the United Nations Charter on the Law of the Sea. It is 1982. So in 1982, the UN clause, the United Nations Charter on the Law of the Sea of 1982, is the law that regulates the law of the sea in international law. You're going to see that with regulation of the sea in international law, you have to know that the sea is divided into zones. So you should know that who has the sole right over this zone, what can happen in this zone, all that is what you have to know. So this charter, or the UN clause of 1982, clearly tells us about that. So what we're going to do is that we are going to divide the sea in different divisions. So I'm going to assume that we are going to rely on Kenya. When you look at Kenya, it is a coastal state. So there is what we call a coastal state. So that is the state that borders, or that is next to the sea, that is next to an ocean. An inland state or a landlocked country could be Uganda. That is a country that does not border the sea, but you have to access or to pass through another country in order to access the sea. So a coastal state is Kenya. What, or up to when, or up to where does Kenya's territory extend in the Indian Ocean? It is what we are going to see. The first one we have to know is a baseline. What is the baseline? Usually it is the coast. The baseline, when you look at the sea, the baseline, this is where the sea starts. So assume this is the sea. It starts from here. This is the water. Baseline. That slope over Kurukaru, over on the land, that is where the baseline is at the sea. Now, from the baseline, you calculate or you count 12 nautical miles. From the baseline, that is from the land, from the soil, or from the beach, you calculate 12 nautical miles from the baseline. So when you calculate 12 nautical miles from the baseline, all that will be territorial water. 12 nautical miles from the baseline, from here to here. It is what we call territorial water, or territorial water, meaning that from 12 nautical miles, I mean from the baseline to 12 nautical miles, that is the territory, or that water is for the territory of Kenya, or the territory of a coastal state. And then that is what we call the territorial airspace. You cannot just fly over there. You cannot do anything without the consent or the permission of Kenya. That is seen in Article 3 of the UN clause, that is the UN Charter on the law of the sea. So Article 3 tells us that when you calculate 12 nautical miles from the baseline, then that water becomes or is territorial water. So realize that with territorial water, it is the water of a particular state, that is a coastal state, and it exercises all rights. However, other countries or other states other than the coastal state have certain rights in territorial waters, and the major right is what we call the right to innocent passage. The right to innocent passage is provided for under Article 17 of the UN clause, that is the United Nations Charter on the Law of the Sea. Article 17 tells us that other countries have a right to innocent passage. What does that mean? They have a right to sail their ships in territorial waters peacefully, like maybe they are going to offload, load, cargo, among others. So they have a right to innocent passage. They can use the territorial water innocently, so long as they don't tamper with the peace. However, you realize that when you enter the territorial waters, my dear, the laws of the coastal state apply on you. So there are situations where certain ships will enter in a coastal or in territorial water, but they begin committing certain offenses. What happens? There is now what we call a right to hot pursuit. A right to hot pursuit is a right that is given to a coastal state to enforce its laws against foreign ships that commit offenses in the territorial waters. Now, that right of hot pursuit is provided for under Article 111 of the UN clause, that is the United Nations Charter on the Law of the Sea. So realize that in that Article 111, this coastal state will have a right to enforce its laws over foreign ships that commit offenses or that violate the territorial laws while they are exercising their right to innocent passage. However, you should know that if this ship commits an offense in maybe the territorial waters of Kenya, and it tries to run away, they can try to chase it until they find it, but the right to hot pursuit will stop where, or you will not have a right to hot pursuit where this ship goes against or passes the territorial waters, meaning that if an offense is committed by a ship in a territorial water and you fail to exercise that right within the territorial waters, should these people take their ship away in your territorial waters, you cannot enforce or you cannot exercise the right to hot pursuit over them. Why? Because they have left your territorial waters. So the right to hot pursuit, you should understand, is where now the coastal state will enforce its laws against the foreign ships that come in their territorial waters while they are exercising their right to innocent passage. That is the territorial water. Then the second zone, or the second category, or the second division of the sea is after you've left the territorial water. Now you go in what we call the contiguous or the contagious zone. Immediately 12 nautical miles from the baseline, that is from the coast, 12 nautical mile, it is territorial water. Now when you exceed 12 nautical mile, again calculate 12 nautical miles from the territorial waters, 12 nautical miles. That is what we call the contiguous zone. So the contiguous zone, as you see, it runs from 12 nautical miles from the baseline, 12 nautical mile to again 12 nautical miles. So in total, the contiguous zone runs 24 nautical miles from the baseline. But as a zone, it runs 12 nautical miles from the territorial water. Now the question is, what provides for that? When you look at Article 33 of the UN clause, the United Nations Charter on the Law of the Sea, Article 33, it tells us that this contiguous zone will run for 12 nautical miles from the territorial water. But the question is, who has a right? Like we have seen in territorial waters, all rights are vested into the coastal state. But who has the right in the territorial or in the contiguous zone? So you're going to see that it is the coastal state again, Kenya, that has control over the contiguous zone. But this time the control Kenya will have in a contiguous zone is a bit limited to majorly enforcing laws of the sea in regards to sanity, among others. Like ships that are using the contiguous zone should not violate sanitary laws, among others. Basically, it is making sure that the sea is okay. You don't come up and plant nuclear, among others. Basically, it is to enforce the sanity of the sea. You realize that very many rights can be exercised by the coastal state in this zone. For example, fishing, putting cables, submarine cables. They can do all activities, among others. So again, the foreign states other than the coastal states have certain rights that they can exercise in this so-called contiguous zone. Also, they can exercise fishing as it is a requirement under Article 51. They can also go and fish. However, you must be fishing but following or respecting international laws. Then they can also exercise the right to innocent passage. Like we saw under Article 1727, this side of the territorial water, even in the contiguous zone, they can exercise the right to fishing, right to innocent passage, Article 52 of the UN clause. So that is the other zone. So it is basically the responsibility of the coastal state to ensure that the contiguous zone is okay. So you know it runs 12 nautical miles from the territorial waters, or it runs 24 nautical miles from the baseline. That is the coast. Then the other zone that is calculated, or that the sea was divided, or an ocean, it was divided into what we call an exclusive economic zone. So what is an exclusive economic zone? So an exclusive economic zone, this is a zone that runs 200 nautical miles. So you calculate 200 nautical miles. Exclusive runs for 200 nautical miles, majorly from the land. Or you can calculate from that to the deep sea. So it runs for 200 nautical miles. So this is the exclusive economic zone. It runs 200 nautical miles. So in this exclusive economic zone, what says that it runs for 200 nautical miles? So when you look at Article 54 of the UN clause, it tells us that this zone will run for 200 nautical miles. However, we should know that who is responsible for this zone as the exclusive economic zone. As you hear, exclusive economic zone. So you're going to see that again, it is there are certain rights that are exercised in this zone by the coastal state. For example, right to set up artificial islands, among others, or construct artificial artworks or highlands in the exclusive economic zone, Article 60, by the coastal state. It can carry out artificial research, or it can carry out scientific research on an exclusive economic zone. They can also prevent or preserve the environment. So they have the right to preserve the environment in the exclusive economic zone. They can set up artificial islands in this zone. They can also carry out scientific research. However, you're going to see that other states also have certain rights in exclusive economic zone. For example, they can navigate, but peacefully, because they have that right under Article 58. So they can navigate, they can sail over this zone. So that is majorly the exclusive economic zone. So for it, it runs 200 nautical miles. Then the other zone is what we call the continental shelf. So the continental shelf as a zone, for it runs again for 200 nautical miles, but this time the continental shelf is on the seabed. It is down. It is not on water, but it is down. So majorly, this is where submarines pass. One sea, down the sea, under the sea. So that is the continental shelf. So it will run for those miles to the deep sea. So it is down under the sea. The question is, what is the continental shelf? So when you look at provisions of Article 76, Article 76 of the UN clause, they will tell us that it comprises of the seabed. Seabed is under the sea. So you go under the sea. That is what we call the continental shelf. So realize that the coastal state has certain rights in the continental shelf. When I talk of a coastal state, I mean Kenya. When you look at Article 77, Article 77 of the UN clause, it tells us that they have a right to explore natural resources. So coastal state can explore natural resources at the continental shelf. Whether living or non-living, they can even undertake research. They can even put their marine cable or submarine cables. So even other states can exercise the same right under the continental shelf. So you have to look at provisions of Article 76 and 77 of the UN clause. Then, lastly, in the division of the sea is what we call the high sea. The high sea, others can call it the deep sea. Now, that high sea, the coastal state is not responsible for it. So that is what we call international water. Uh, that high sea, every state can exercise. So majorly any ship, the rights that that are exercised on the high sea majorly run from Article 86. Every country has a right to navigate on the high sea. They can fish, they can undertake research, everything can be done. They can set up artificial islands on the high seas. But what you should know is that while you are on the ice, on the high sea, each country has a duty to have a flag on their ship in the high sea. And that flag shows that it is an American ship, meaning that the laws of America applies in on that ship. So basically, no aspect of it is the coastal state that is responsible for it. So the high seas, this is the part of the sea where all countries have divided or equal responsibility over it. However, you should maintain peace. Now, there is something that we should know, a dispute resolution. So there are various, how do we resolve disputes maybe on the high seas? So there are various laws that came in that help in the dispute resolution. You can refer to the ICJ, you can refer to various international tribunals in order for you to resolve your conflicts on the sea. So basically that is the law of the sea.